right, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Ralph's Real Review, where today we are going over the adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. That is the last time I'm going to call it that. From now on, I am just going to call it Ichabod and Mr. Toad, or Ichabod or Mr. Toad, or whatever. But that's the full title, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Before we get started, I wanted to do a quick channel update. There were two things I wanted to talk about. First is a release schedule. I've been kind of playing around. My views are fluctuating, which, like, I'm a small channel, like that's going to happen. But I would like to consistently at least be in like the hundreds of views to get eyes on the videos. And as I've moved towards Saturday releases, that hasn't really happened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release these videos on Mondays. So like right now is Labor Day. And I'm going to record now, but release for next Monday since I just released on Saturday. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to do full reviews on Mondays. The shorts, the rapid reviews will come out on Tuesdays, and then on Thursdays I'll be reviewing new movies. That's the first part. I'm going to be moving into that realm of having scheduled videos so you guys are more aware of when I'm posting consistently. And secondarily, the subscriber part, right? So most of my viewers are actually not subscribed. I think about 15% of my viewers are subscribed viewers. Most of my views come from outside. So right now, our subscriber goal is 25 by Cinderella, and Cinderella is the next video. And as of this recording, which again is Labor Day, we are about one subscriber away. I think we're at 24 right now. We need to get to 25. So if you're watching this video and you have not subscribed, I encourage you, please, to subscribe. You could be the person who helps us reach this milestone, which is what I'm looking to do right now by the time we hit Cinderella. So if you could do that, I would greatly appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get into the review. So Ichabod and Mr. Toad, let's flip it, right? It's Mr. Toad's part comes first, and then Ichabod's comes second. Mr. Toad is about a wealthy toad who gets hyper fixated on things. So he actually owes a lot of money to a lot of different people, but he's right now like fixated on this horse and buggy. But then he sees a car and he becomes fixated on the car, and essentially he gets framed for stealing a car, which he didn't do. And he sets off to clear his name. That's the whole point of that short. And then the second short is about Ichabod Crane, who is a school teacher in like colonial America. He's from New York. He comes out, and pretty much him and this really buff dude, I forgot his name, but they're both after the same girl. I believe her name is Katrina, and she's very wealthy. She's very beautiful. They're both after her, and Ichabod keeps besting this buff dude. However, buff dude finds out that Ichabod is very superstitious and he's afraid of supernatural things. So he tells the story of the Headless Horseman. And while Ichabod goes home from this party that they're all at, he gets attacked by the Headless Horseman. And that is the plot of this movie. Two separate stories with their plots. Starting in the animation category, I have Ichabod and Mr. Toad at 5, right ahead of Bambi, and I believe right before Dumbo. I got to double check the rankings. But the reason that I have it at that number is because for most of these anthology films, I didn't feel like there was a sequence. While I might have felt like the animation overall was maybe better than a Bambi or a Dumbo, there were sequences from those movies that I remember that you remember, right? Whether Bambi, it's the forest scene. With Dumbo, it's Pink Elephants on Parade. With Ichabod and Mr. Toad, I felt like there was a level of action that I got from both shorts that I didn't really get in the other anthology shorts. And when you combine that, or at least when I feel like when I combine that action with the overall increase in animation, I felt like it was enough to overtake Bambi, which I felt, at least the version that I saw on Disney Plus, was very dull, and put it into that number 5 spot. For storytelling, I actually have Ichabod and Mr. Toad very high. I have it at 4, ahead of Snow White, but behind Pinocchio. And the reason that I have it in the rankings there is essentially when it comes to storytelling, I'm looking at a number of factors, but the bottom line is how engaging is your story? And then different factors could lead into that, right? Like Pinocchio and Dumbo, I feel like are very similar, but Dumbo's runtime being so low, I felt was more fitting for that story. Whereas Pinocchio, it did feel like certain scenes kind of extended a little bit too long. That's why I have Dumbo ahead of Pinocchio in storytelling, right? But when I'm looking at Ichabod and Mr. Toad compared to a Snow White, while I'm not a fan of the anthology storytelling that they've been doing, I feel like this was the best that they have done it. And it's in not trying to package it like they did with Fun and Fancy Free with this weird like connecting thing in the middle. It was just like this guy who's like, hey, here's a story and here's a story, and they're two separate stories. The runtime was short. I do believe it was about like an hour and 9 minutes or so. But the shorts, the whole point of what I'm trying to get at here is that the shorts were engaging. And Snow White, for its iconic status, and I understand its iconic status, I do not find Snow White to be a fun watch. I just don't. I think that it has its place. I think that it has its moments, but for the most part, I find Snow White to be a pretty dull movie. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I know you're probably not supposed to say that, but that's how I feel. Ichabod and Mr. Toad, I do not feel that way. I feel like Mr. Toad is very, very fun, and very energetic, and I haven't always felt that way. Most of the time I watch this, it's for the Headless Horseman. But then the Headless Horseman story too is very engaging and very fun. So because of that, I'm going to put it above Snow White because I do feel like the story is more engaging. Um, but the anthology part of it to me still keeps it beneath, a Dumbo and a Pinocchio. For characters, I have Ichabod and Toad high again. I have it up at number five, and the reason for that being the memorability of these characters. Right, this is the first time that I think you could look at these anthology films and say, here are two characters that you probably know. I will say I don't know how good they are in like the mainstream, right? So I'm looking at a Headless Horseman. I think most people will be able to see the Headless Horseman and know that's the Headless Horseman, even if they're not familiar with where it came from. I think it's visually recognizable. Mr. Toad is going to be recognizable from Disney fans, and maybe even from some people who are not Disney fans, but definitely from Disney fans, just because of the ride by itself, right? So you have the memorability factor that a lot of these anthology films do not have outside of like the Three Caballeros, right? But then in addition to that, you do have strong characters. You have characters who I believe are strong in their own rights, even if they're not memorable, right? I believe they're stronger than what we're looking at in terms of the Three Caballeros, but I don't believe that they're as strong as what we're looking at in Bambi. So I have it right between those two there at five. When it comes to the Disney factor, I have Ichabod and Mr. Toad at eight, ahead of Melody Time and behind Fun and Fancy Free. I do feel like this is more of a Disney movie than some of the other ones, but the reason why it's so low is because there is a darkness to this movie that other ones don't have in the same way. A lot of this early Disney stuff is very dark, and that's why these movies are probably going to stay at the bottom of the rankings as we move forward. But when it comes to Ichabod and Mr. Toad, the Mr. Toad part really isn't terrible. But the Ichabod part, it's not terrible either. But there's alluded murder, right? It's assumed that somebody has perished in this movie, and not was just perished, but was like actively killed. And on top of that, there's this like weird gold digging, like misogynistic love thing between Ichabod and Katrina where it's like he's very much into her for her money, and like it's like, oh my god, like you're rich and you're beautiful, like I want to take advantage of you, and that's supposed to be like normal, which is kind of wild, like especially in retrospect. So I did have to knock it a couple pegs down for that, which is why I have Ichabod at eight. For music, I also have it at eight. I kind of like the music in Ichabod and Mr. Toad. I don't remember much from Mr. Toad and Ichabod. It's kind of filled with music, but almost to a way that it's kind of detrimental. I like the Katrina song. I think it's fine. I like the Ichabod song. I think it's fine. It's catchy. It's whatever. But the Headless Horseman, they're all like lively little oldies. And it's the same thing for the Headless Horseman short, which is weird to me when you're talking about like lyrically, like chopping dudes' heads off and replacing their skulls with your like it's that's like the lyrics, but it's sung in like a non-eerie, happy, lively oldies tune, and I don't know why they did that. Like I feel like they missed an opportunity to have better music, more so than them having bad music, which is why I decided to put it at eight. So box office success is where this movie falls down. It is at about $20 million, putting it 10th out of 11 movies so far. And if you're paying attention to the rankings here, you see that pretty much every anthology film after the Three Caballeros, it's just going down and down and down and down and down each time. So the Disney company at this point really is struggling financially. I don't know that it's on the like edge of bankruptcy. I got to read more into that part of it, but clearly every single box office return is getting smaller and smaller and smaller when adjusted for inflation, meaning it was getting smaller and smaller and smaller when it wasn't adjusted for inflation. I do know that Cinderella comes in and kind of saves that, but for right now, when it comes to Ichabod and Mr. Toad, it is at 10th. And then finally, we have the historical significance part, and this is where Ichabod and Mr. Toad is really carried by Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, which is a ride that is still open in Disneyland, not open in Disney World. I have ridden it before. I don't think it's anything special, but it is still there. This is a ride in which you do die and go to hell. It's really crazy. But the historical significance of this movie is carried on through the legacy of Mr. Toad, most specifically do that ride. I would love to know how this movie does on streaming through like the Halloween months. I do think it's a really fun Halloween watch, a fun fall watch. Mostly for the Ichabod part and the Headless Horseman. That is a story that I think is bigger than this movie. I wonder how much of that is spawned from this movie, or if this was just a popular story before it and a popular story after it, and this is just somewhere in the middle. But the historical significance of this ride is very much carried by the fact that Mr. Toad's Wild Ride exists, and it's a fan favorite in the parks. It did exist in Magic Kingdom. I believe it was replaced by the Winnie the Pooh ride, which a lot of people weren't happy about. But anyway, when it comes to the historical significance of this movie, that's what it is. I'm putting most of the emphasis on that, and I would adjust it in the rankings if there was someone in the comments who could tell me like, hey, it does crazy streaming numbers during the Halloween months, and this is a huge part of people's cultural celebration of Halloween. I would have no problem moving it up if someone could provide that data. But as far as I've seen, I haven't seen that. So yeah, right now that's where I have it. So finally, that takes us to the tier rankings. And when it comes to Ichabod and Mr. Toad, I do feel like this is right up there with the best of the anthologies. I would even argue that it is the best of the anthology movies. But where does that leave us, right? So again, we're looking at everyone should watch, movie fans should watch, Disney fans should watch, Disney diehards should watch, and then totally skippable. And when I'm looking at the average audience member, right, this movie is fun. I think it's engaging. I don't know that it's something that I would say as a movie fan, like it really stands out here or it really stands out there nowadays, right? I think if you're going to go back and I'm going to say to anybody, like, hey, you should really watch this, is because I'm going to say, here's an era in Disney history where they were releasing anthology movies for about somewhere around 10 years, right? This is the best of that. And to that, I'm going to say that that is something that I would say to a Disney fan, right? I wouldn't look at a general moviegoer and say that. I wouldn't look to just a general person and say that, right? I'm really looking at the Disney fans here, and I'm saying, hey, if you want to go back and look at the best of the anthology series, like this time period, go watch the Three Caballeros and go watch the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, and yeah, that's why I have it in that tier. You guys let me know what you think though, and as I'm trying to create this release schedule, let me know, when do you typically watch my videos? Do you watch my videos, right? I want to release things when they're going to be watched, which right now I'm thinking is about like Monday at 3 o'clock, like after work. So let me know. If you haven't followed yet, please follow me on Instagram at Ralph Reviews so you can see my posts whenever I put up. Also on YouTube, please subscribe. We are one subscriber short, y'all. I can't say it enough. We are one subscriber short. So please go ahead and subscribe to my channel so we can reach that. And then finally on TikTok, I post Ralph's Rapid Reviews, which that is currently growing at a faster rate than my YouTube, but I still release those, the Ralph's Rapid Reviews, I release that here too. So if you want to see that, I'll release it on TikTok first, and then I'll release it on YouTube the day after. So please, guys, feel free, like, comment, subscribe, follow, all that. All right, I'm at 14:30. I'm out of here. Bye, guys.